Welcome to this video on having a carefrontational conversation. So what is a carefrontational conversation? Well, it's a way in which we can dialogue with either ourselves or somebody else to try and get through a challenge or a problem. One of the biggest challenges that we face when we have our own issues, our own problems, is that often we don't feel safe in being able to share that. Having a confrontational conversation is all about creating safety in ourselves and in others. So let's dive in. Okay, so step one of this process is really, really important. It creates the ground rules of safety in the other person. And you can, of course, use this with yourself. But I'm going to focus on having a conversation with somebody else. The first thing we need to do, though, is to make sure that they're ready to have this conversation. So you might want to set this up to say, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you about something that's been on my mind. Is this a good time? And if it isn't, then put something in the diary. Give them the opportunity to say, this isn't a good time, but maybe we can talk later. And say, okay, let's do that at 4 p.m. or something like that. So the first thing we need to do is to set up a time for that conversation. Why is this bit so important? Well, we often will go into a situation acknowledging what we need. But what we first need to do is make sure that if we need to have a conversation with somebody where we believe there might be a challenge, there might be some friction, we need to make sure that their mind feels safe. Remember, the mind's job is to keep you safe. That's its primary function. And if we want to have a conversation with somebody, we need to be able to put them at ease. We need to put their nervous system into that parasympathetic state where the part of the brain called the dorsal prefrontal cortex is going to be online. When that part of the brain isn't online, we go into fight, flight, we go into that fear state where we often might not react in a way which is helpful. So once we start that conversation, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say, what I love about you is, or I've noticed this, and when you do this, I feel connected to you. So let's say, for example, you need to have a difficult conversation with a partner. Before you go into that conversation, what are all the amazing things that they may do? Even if it doesn't come across the way that you'd like, what is it that they do? Maybe they're really good at cooking. Maybe they're really good at fixing things. Maybe they're really, really good at doing something that you're not. So really think about that. What is it that that person does that adds value to your life? Now, if they don't do anything that has value to your life, then that's a different conversation. But in most cases, we're looking to make that person feel safe, that they have some value, and that's really, really important. So what is it you love about the person? Part 2. You have to take responsibility for your part in this. You can't expect somebody to do what you want them to do. So now it's time to reflect. This is what I've learned about myself. And then you take responsibility for your part in that challenge that may in the past have caused some sort of confrontation. It's all about you've done the work and reflected. So the first thing is you're going to tell the person what you love about them. You're going to tell that person what value they bring in your life. And that will create safety. It will create connection. And then you're going to say, this is what I've learned about myself. And it's to do with this challenge. It's to do with this conversation. And then the third part is, this is what I believe would be the best way to move this forward. And this is the bit that's open to discussion. This is probably where we tend to dive straight in. But because we've set that person up to say, this is what I love, this is what I appreciate, this is what value you bring into my life, and this is what I've learned about myself, they're now going to be more open to having that discussion. So put your cards on the table and say to them, this is how I'd love to resolve this challenge. This is what I believe would work. And I want to give you an example. So I had a client who needed to have a difficult conversation around an addiction. And the person's wife was not in a great place to be that receptive. It had caused a lot of problems. And so we needed to shift away from the problem to actually the resolution, which was they were disconnected because of this drug problem. So we needed to negate the drug problem, but we also needed to create the connection. So there was this challenge. And so this is how we navigated this situation. I got that person to say, what is it that person is doing for you that maybe you feel some shame, some guilt about? And it was all about the fact that person had always been there for them, that person was trying to help them, but they hadn't kept up their side of the bargain. And because addiction is quite difficult to overcome, there was this friction. And so what we said was that if we want to create connection, which is what addiction is about a lack of connection, we need to create the connection. And so the connection became part of the solution, and we didn't even talk about the drugs aspect of it. So I don't know how the conversation went, but this is what we spoke about, and it is working for that person. And it was like this: if you ever felt that you wanted to take drugs, it's about connection. So what I want you to do is, every night when you come home from work, I want you to give your wife a hug for 20 seconds or more. Why is it 20 seconds? Well, if we hug for more than 20 seconds or kiss for 6 seconds, we create this hormone called oxytocin, which makes us feel safe. It's our bonding hormone. And so what I said to him was to say this: tell your wife what you love about her, all of the things that she's been trying to do to help you. Then tell her what you've realized after working with me and what it is that you really want and what you really need. And that need is to be connected to his wife, his kids, his family. The drugs was taking him away from that. So the physical action, or the ask, was, every night when I come home, I'd like us to hug for at least 20 seconds. That was it. Now, I said that you can't expect your wife to do that. And interestingly, he said there's no way she's going to do that. Things are that tough at the moment. But what was interesting was that when we set that conversation up using this 3-part process, actually, his wife was very receptive to that. And so we need to remember that maybe things aren't going to work out the way they work out unless we set them up. We need to create safety first. So the safety is telling that person what value they have in your life. That creates connection. The second part is reflecting on what you've learned. What was your part in this? And what have you understood? And then it's about saying what it is that you need, but also making that a value to them. And that's the bit that's up for discussion. And then once you've created that contract, it's being consistent in taking action on that. And that is how we have a carefrontational conversation.